The Renegade Accelerator is open for enrollment, female leaders, executives, founders who are asking themselves, why not now? This is for you. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com. I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now Show. Today, we have Bill Shufelt on the show. He is the co-founder of Athletic Brewing, and this is a conversation that really leaves no stone unturned. Athletic Brewing is a brand that I have a bit of a crush on, and Bill and his team are disrupting the industry. There is so much momentum, so much change. But in this conversation, Bill and I discuss how he got into this, his ultimate why not now idea. Everything was good. He thought he was set. He was happy. But there was this idea that would not leave him alone. Exactly what happened the day that he greenlit his why not now idea. We talk about how he operates day to day and his consistency. We also discuss things like his team. We discuss how he is disrupting, but still there are fundamentals that are true and true. And I find the business and the operations of the business very fascinating. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Without further ado, here's Bill. Bill, welcome to the Why Not Now show. I'm excited for you to be here in Austin with me.
Thank you. Excited to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Here we go in the spirit of Why Not Now. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm curious to hear your answer. Tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make, and you had to ask yourself the question, why not now? And we'll dissect that delta between idea and action.
Yeah. So I definitely have one specific moment in mind, but it's also interesting that my life went from almost no moments of why not now to like all moments of why not now after. And this like moment is kind of like when that switch happened.
It opened the floodgates of why not now.
And I kind of became like a really action-oriented person, like make decisions, make progress. And but I will almost pass that decision to my wife in a way where we've known each other since high school. And she saw the idea germinate of Athletic Brewing. I worked on it for 2 years, had this very well-developed business plan, which she was really supportive in encouraging me to even start on that journey. But I had this great finance job. Like I worked at one of the world's biggest hedge funds. I didn't even have a LinkedIn profile, didn't take calls from recruiters. I was not planning on leaving that seat for the next 20 years. Perfectly stable, content future for my family. But my wife saw the passion I had personally for Athletic Brewing. And I'd never personally had fulfillment for work. There was no bigger why behind it. It certainly didn't light my fire every day. And my wife took me out to dinner on one of the last days of 2016. I was 2 years into business planning at this point, and she was basically like, I went through all your business planning materials over the last few days, and she's like, I want you to walk in to work and quit on the first business day of the year. We can afford it. We can budget for it, but I don't want to know you in 10 years if we're just still talking about this idea. And she said, just do it right now. And really, like, it was like the definition of this kind of moment. And it was gosh. And it's so funny is like, I spent my whole life from high school probably building to where that career was at the point, and I had never even considered anything.
Yeah. Power play, no LinkedIn. Like, I'm good.
Yeah. And like, it was exactly where I wanted to be. It was exactly what I'd been shooting for 15 plus years. And my wife and I were basically like, okay, we're going to leave all that, burn the boats, haven't thought about it a day since, and off on this new adventure.
Burn the boats. Okay, let's cheers to that and your wife, because I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Cheers.
And it's she's incredibly talented. She has had her own interesting journey, has her MBA, and so she was so supportive in recognizing that moment. And it's such a like underappreciated or understated element of an entrepreneurial journey for like your household to be along for the ride and supportive of that, because it is intensive, so.
Absolutely. And the fact that she reviewed your materials for a couple of weeks and she gave you that confidence of, no, I've like done my diligence, and that's incredible. So let's go back to, this had to have been brewing, no pun intended. But you had built a business plan and you hadn't greenlit it though. Was it just a confidence thing, or were you thinking maybe you would parallel this with your other job for a while, or what? I mean, her confidence was huge, but you had been thinking of like dating, flirting with the idea, right?
Yeah, and really 2 weeks before that moment, I had told my first colleague about the idea. I was like, I got to tell someone about this. We were on a ski trip together. I was like, there's a 10% chance I ever do anything with this, but it's something I'm passionate about and I've put a couple of years of work into. But I still thought there was a 10% chance I was going to do it because I had a good career. And like, what's the point of taking an enormous amount of risk if you already have a good career? And my wife also connected that dot for me. She had seen the transformation that had happened in my life. So I had stopped drinking about 2.5 years before that moment when I quit my job. And my wife saw me transform in that time period, like an intellectual curiosity turned back on at night, my health, my fitness, my sleep, relationships, career productivity, everything. It was like this virtuous cycle when you remove that ceiling of alcohol in my life. And it's just for me personally, like no judgments on anyone.
Totally.
But she basically connected the dots of when you in your career or social occasions wanted something moderate, it literally doesn't exist out there. Like it is not possible for adults to socialize and like be moderate without heavy stigmatization. And she saw the impact on my life. We had done enough research to know that over 15 million households are impacted by alcohol use disorder. And that's just documented cases. So that number is probably way higher. We've seen recent health figures from all over, but like potentially attributing 5% of cancer to alcohol, heart disease, and on and on and on, like incarcerations. And my wife and I like kind of cobbled that all together and for the first time painted a picture where if we made moderation accessible and cool and delicious and the best part of people's day, what is the ripple effect on society and tens of millions of people if we just make that accessible? And all of a sudden it went from comparing two economic ideas to comparing something like this chance at having an impact. And for the first time I saw like, this is the way I can make a positive dent in the world. And it just like lit my fire and it hasn't even come close to going out yet. If anything, it like rages harder than ever. So, yeah.
Which is just an incredible story. And I do want to fast forward. But first, just something you said it was time to just burn my boat, right? And at Renegade, you know, we have 5 Renegade rules. Number 2 is you don't give yourself an out. You put a mechanism into place that holds you accountable. And that's because we've got 300 plus interviews with individuals like you and working so closely with incredible business minds. It seems there's always that mechanism that, nope, you're moving forward across the starting line, which your wife helped nudge you, right? And when you think about why not now and how you said, you know, this opened the floodgates and now, you know, you doing what you love and being very good at it has now created this momentum of why not now, all day, every day. I just think that that's what's so cool about the contagion. So I want to share with you. So I've had a crush on your brand for a while, right? As a marketer.
Thank you.
Growing up, I didn't necessarily have a crush on boys as much as I did brands. It was like, oh my gosh. So when Jimmy DeSico reached out and said, hey, will you come and be on a panel with Super Coffee and Athletic Brewing? I said, yes, right away. And he hadn't even shared some of the names on the panel. I'm like, you don't even need to name drop. Like, I'll come because of Athletic. And I'm an investor in Super Coffee. But what you just said about the stigma of just being out New York or LA and being at business dinners, I don't really want to order an O'Doul's and be like, oh, got my O'Doul's, right? But you've done such a great job with the brand and the branding that I'm proud to be carrying, you know, on Athletic. And it's obviously quality and taste and product, but there's also just a cool factor and cachet. Did that go into the product development and the packaging, or like, how did you approach that? Wanting to blend in?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Super Coffee and the brothers as well.
Me too.
It's a great product and company. Yeah, in terms of, I knew we had a huge challenge on our hands with non-alcoholic beer because I knew intuitively that it's something I wanted in my life. And I thought I was a close enough approximation to the just normal, modern, healthy adult that wants to be a little better at their career, a little healthier, and kind of in the pursuit of progress, to say. And so I knew I was an approximation for a very large number of people. So I kind of designed a lot of it to speak to myself in a way. But non-alcoholic beer was born out of Prohibition. From the day it launched, it was a lesser than product. It was like, you can no longer have this. You are stuck with this. And so, of course, when alcohol came back, non-alcoholic beer became like a total penalty box sacrifice occasion beverage. And it was thought to be for like 1% of the people, 1% of the time. And that was ingrained in society for like 80 years before we like really tried to tackle this. So we had not only like 50 years of no product innovation in the category, when the whole grocery store, like we're in the home of Whole Foods here, like when the whole grocery store became so exciting, like every aisle of the store, every product, like local, homegrown, organic, like everything, and dusty bottles in this category and huge marketing stigmatization. And then, so we knew we had a big product challenge and marketing challenge, and like probably equally as big. And so on the product side, me and our other co-founder, John, so John's like our brewmaster, COO,
you
technical
have to tell
expert.
how you met him too. We'll go back to that, but that's classic.
Yeah. And so I would say totally redefined how non-alcoholic beer is made, and that's a whole story in itself. And then, but the marketing side, to speak to your question, I've always thought about Athletic really long term. Like a lot of products are contract manufactured. People think about the sales and marketing for like 3 months, go to market, get out there, learn lessons. And at Athletic, I already mentioned we had a 2-year business planning process. So I was like sitting at my table thinking about brand and what do I want this company to be for weekends, nights, everything. And so I had a lot of time there. And then homebrewing around Gatorade jugs, John and I had 8-hour days with like nothing to talk about except what do we want this company to be? What do we want the community to be, and everything. And so we had a lot of long lead time to think about that. And I knew in this generation too, the products I love and fall in love with, I want to know more about the company. I want to know who they are. Do they make the products? Where do they source? How do they give back to communities? And so I wanted for Athletic to have it be like an onion where even if you're in our community for 5 years, you're still peeling back that onion being like, I had no idea they did this. Or like you like learn about our Two for the Trails program, or like our sourcing, our community impact, and like every year figuring out something you love. Like maybe you fall in love with the brand for the outdoors, the aesthetic, and like the great tasting beer. But then hopefully you peel back that onion for like 5+ years. So
okay, that's really interesting. And if we were to fast forward, I mean, you've been on a ride, right? So it started in 2017 officially, but have been pre-planning. And you've raised, a number of times, but also the category is growing like crazy, but the company is also, right? Not only within non-alcoholic beer, but also within, the beer industry. We were just speaking at the National Wholesale, amazing beer event, and some of your colleagues and your, fellow, I just say colleagues are not colleagues, comrades. I don't know. What do you call them? Yeah.
It's like
peer circle. They're the biggest beer brands in the world. Like the CEOs were on that panel with us, and then there's you. Because you've earned, your seat at the table, and it's not a this or that, a competitive. So with this crazy growth, how would you give us the movie trailer of 2017 to now?
Yeah.
Like what are the big...
Well, I'd say so if you go back 10 years ago to when I was in the height of this pain point, like out at bars and restaurants, social events, weddings, everything all the time without any good options. And like, that's where the real pain point was. And I was like, I hope we can get this movement started And then in future generations, they can open up menus, and either side of the menu is super exciting. And that was like my future vision of the world, to have this major inflection point in a 5,000-year history of adult beverages, all of a sudden in a 5-year period, have this major change happen, which is a big disruption. And so I'd say in many ways, the moment you just described, where we're in the biggest beer conference in the country, and a significant portion of the conversation is around non-alcoholic beverages and how exciting it is. Like, I would almost mark that as like we've reached escape velocity and like accomplished like the first part of our mission in a way.
That's a big landmark then. Yeah.
And so that's really exciting to hear. All these beer companies, all the biggest international alcohol companies are now in this category in a serious way, which is super exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and Whole Foods, by the way. So Whole Foods, headquartered here in Austin, Texas. You're the number one beer brand sold of all beer, not just NA, right?
Yep. Yeah, the number one adult beverage in Whole Foods. And credit to Whole Foods for overhauling the category and taking a big bet on a forward-looking innovation that they thought their customers would like. I walked into Whole Foods with unlabeled brown bottles, and they got really excited about it. And so,
gotta love Texas and Austin, right? It started here, but the distribution too, you're now international. And I have to share with you. So as I was interviewing some of the other CEOs of the big beer brands, and we were talking about NA, there's so much respect, just cumulative respect for what you've built.
Oh, thank you.
And rightfully so. And as I'm digging, a lot of people refer to your willingness to not just focus on scale right out of the gate. Like, you clearly wanted to get it right, and it's incremental, growth. When we were preparing for this interview, I had a chance to talk to your team. I talked to Chris. And I wanted to dig into this because to me that signaled, okay, that's something about him and just knowing pace. And what was it that we could dig into? Like, what's your superpower? And I said, so what's Bill's X factor? And this was the most interesting thing. I've been thinking about it since we had this conversation. He said, Bill goes 60 miles an hour all the time. He doesn't slow down. He doesn't speed up. He doesn't. And it's just like, he's really hard to get, upset. You've never seen him, angry. And it's really hard to like throw you off. And he just really is an even keel. And he said, even when you are pencils down, maybe with your family, then you'll be hopping back in. But there's just this consistency. And I feel like our society, especially the way we've romanticized the entrepreneurial life, is not that anymore. Like, consistency is a lost art. But first of all, do you agree that that's probably one of the things, like, your superpowers?
Absolutely. I think time, consistency, showing up every day are like totally underrated. Everyone loves to dream of the shortcut, the easy solution, and it's just almost never the case. Like, of course, there are amazing entrepreneurs who hit lightning in a bottle, like Facebook and stuff like that. But for the most part, like, I think the way to win big is just be really consistent for a long time. And yeah, it's not possible to go 100 miles an hour and do it with quality and do it with intention and do things well. It is very possible to go, 60 miles an hour every day and have like decent balance. But I was meeting with two earlier stage entrepreneurs yesterday here in Austin. And they were like, how do you keep balance and like not burn out and like find time for fitness and stuff? I was like, literally every day I just try to do like one or two things and make sure in the first 2 hours of the day I get like one or two things done. And that day is kind of a win right there. And if you do one or two key things every single business day of the year, like, you're covering a lot of ground.
Because that compounds over time, right?
For sure. Yeah. And you don't get as stuck and you like lower the pressure on yourself. And that really carries through from my prior trading career also. I had 12 monitors. There was 1,000 stimuli every minute. And I think calmness was a real benefit there. People used to yell at me and be like, do you care? Like, what's going on? But I think the like calmness, like just taking the emotion out of riding every stock up and down and every P&L tick, like, really helped me in that career also. So
interesting. And it sounds so, I think sometimes it can sound like, oh, it's Captain Obvious, consistency. And it's like, no, that's so like, easy to let go of when you get going, because you probably could have easily sped up to 100, 1,000 times. But it sounds like your habits are wired, you're wired that way with other things. You mentioned fitness, family time. Is there tension? Like, do you feel the tension more at certain times, like when you've been raising money, and what do you do when you feel that tension?
Yeah. I think the book Atomic Habits by James Clear puts it in such perspective of like that, like being consistent is such a superpower that if you focus on something for like 3 or 4 weeks, you're immediately in the top like 70% of people. Like most people give up after like hours, if not 1 or 2 days. And then if you stick with something 6 months, you're probably in the top 90% of it. And like consistency in time is it's like undefeated. And so I've definitely always got that in the back of my mind. And then there are, we have an incredible team at Athletic Brewing, and I don't want to take credit for most of what we do at Athletic Brewing because there are such extremely talented specialists who are so far beyond my skill in their realm. And but there are, as you referenced, like fundraising or like very important things where like I know I need to show up and nail these. Sometimes it's only 3 to 5 major things a year, and then the rest is all very much around the edges of everyday stuff. And so I definitely focus and like make sure to execute on key projects for sure. And there's, it's so easy to get caught in your email inbox or like text messages, and like you can be as busy as you want. Like there are unlimited emails, and the more email you send, the more you get back, and like the less you get accomplished. And so I always try to start with like the big building block and like, did I get the big thing done for the team today? And then all that. Yeah.
And so do you, with priority management, not time management, but more priority, do you, with email, I've emailed with you and you're so quick to respond.
Oh,
like and it's not a priority. I don't think I'm a priority. But do you try to get back to everyone, or have you just found the right systems and processes to filter? Are you a big process guy?
Maybe unintentionally, but yeah, I generally try to like divide my time on when I'm focusing on different things. And there have been times in my life too where I'm trying to have too many priorities too. And I find it is really only possible to do 2 or 3 things really well. And so like if I had to list a top 3, it's obviously like family. And I've found a way in my entrepreneurial journey to have like 2 really well-defined blocks of time every day where I'm like focusing on family. And then me and my wife also try to be really thoughtful about like our annual calendar. Like what do we want in like 5-10 years to look back on and make sure we get done as a family, and like what are our priorities as a family? Are they like memorable trips, daily weekend traditions, different things? And so we try to like put that in more of an annual calendar, which helps.
Yeah.
So like really clearly making family a priority. And then there's really mostly only work for family and athletic. And then, sleep and workouts are like close third priorities, are like, I'm just much more efficient with my athletic time and a better family member if I take care of sleep and health. But beyond that, there are times in my life where I've tried to do way too much with friends, way too much with like getting pulled in so many directions. And then you lose sight of the big building blocks too. So,
and growing up, were you always pretty even keel? I'm thinking about like just emotional regulation and then the habits of consistency. And those 2 things are like amazing together.
Yeah, if I go back to try to like figure out where I guess that quality came from, my mom was always extremely optimistic and so supportive. Like I think gave me this like delusional confidence in myself. And like I remember specifically a time I went to her in middle school with like 3 big goals. And she was like, you can do all those things.
Awesome.
And like, without a doubt. And so I had a lot of good role models in my house and my grandparents in my community, which I feel really fortunate for. I came from a very wealthy community. I unfortunately was not in that, but it gave me like good examples to try to strive towards. So I think that's part of it. I think one of the main things that has made me relatively unflappable under pressure in like my financial career and this career is I rode the ambulance as a high school student. So in the town I grew up in, it's a volunteer ambulance service that high school kids are basically the EMTs and ambulance drivers. And it's a really rigorous training program. Huh. But then you are thrown into like very high stress situations. Wow. Like I, as a EMT, was kind of like the first responder and lead to 5 heart attacks. And one of the calls, a young girl went through the windshield on the highway. And
so you were experiencing these intense situations.
Yeah, where it was like, emotion is not productive in this, like get down to business immediately. Yeah. And so I think that has carried through a little bit as well. That's awesome.
So, I just thought that was such a cool thing for your team to say, you know.
For sure, yeah.
Because that gives you an immediate insight into your culture, and it comes through as a consumer, like as a super fan somehow. But
sorry to interrupt, but no. With our team and everything, like half my job, I feel like, is just to like hammer on bureaucracy and make sure as we become a moderately bigger company that we don't become a big structural organization that like, and it can be really painful to grind through bureaucracy and be an action first company. And
do you call it bureaucracy?
That's fine.
Do you call it? No.
Unbelievable at the puns. Maybe I should brand it though.
You should, because it's a...
If I make it painful enough a pun, people will hate it so much that it'll be a first. Yeah.
And then they'll call each other out on it. Yeah. Like innovation allergies, bureaucracy.
Yeah. And then the other thing is like kind of leading by example and like doing very small ball community first things over and over again and leading by example doing that, I think is really good for the team. So we never like lose connection with our roots. Like so many companies get to a size and they just do a big annual campaign and like that's what they do. And it's like, what about like all this community opportunity you're like vacating? And so, yeah.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Female leaders, executives, founders, heads up, the Renegade Accelerator is open for enrollment. Renegades are at the top of their game. They're doing all the things, but usually there's something that they really want to do. What you do is you bring your why not now idea into this 8-week program. We're focused on curriculum, the Renegade mindset, collaboration, and accountability. We are all focused on growing our thought leadership, finding more time in the day by leveraging our presence. So it is present even when we are not. We are focused on optimizing our time and money and health. It is a mosaic of all types of women from different backgrounds at the top of their game, and the value exchange is exponential. Here are some why not now ideas that have come to life through Renegade. Why not now write the book? I want to get a board seat. I want to increase my speaking fee. I want to build a company. I want to pivot from corporate into entrepreneurship. I want a promotion within corporate. I want to move my brick and mortar company online so I have more freedom. I want to travel 25% of the year, but not see a dip in income. Those are a variety of why not now ideas that have been greenlit. They're done. What is your why not now idea? We're ready. If you're ready, head to renegadeaccelerator.com for more information and to apply. I think that was one of the things that I realized. I won't call it your competitive set because you're really in your own category, but those, some of the big beer brands, they realized early of, wow, that's helped. That boots on the ground, grassroots, they're clearly not just trying to scale as fast as they can, but you had some deep roots. So you're now, there have been 2 incredible, great articles early here in 2025 about the business and just the growth and the story. And you mentioned, you're trying to keep that vibe and essence alive, but you're also growing so quickly. Bloomberg threw out a valuation that was, 800 million. And I'm not throw out, but you know what I mean. With that type of pressure, but also that type of growth, I read somewhere that, people were probably always asking, like, what are you going to sell? Or were you going to go public? And I think your comment was something like, hey, we're just having a blast.
Yeah.
And that was so cool. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It's such an honor to have outlets like that write nice pieces and do video pieces and help us tell that story, because awareness is still so low that non-alcoholic beer has changed, and the beer and alcohol world is so big, billions of cases of beer and everything, and even though we think we've come a long way, we are just scratching the surface, and in some places we're way farther along than others, but in the global beer world, we are just scratching the surface, and that gets me so excited. It's funny, as big in the awareness boost as some of those stories are, we were on the cover of a hometown magazine last month, and I have gotten an absurd amount of outreach for that. I walked into the barbershop and they were like, ah!
Awesome.
I thought that was the piece you're referring to.
Not Bloomberg.
I'm joking. It's in terms of the ultimate direction of the company, and of course, we have raised a lot of shareholder capital and have an unbelievable group of investors. Starting with our 70 angel investors who helped us build the first non-alcoholic brewery in the country, and we didn't even have product. The market was non-existent. There was less than zero buzz about it.
Can we hat tip to Blake, because he's been on the podcast and he's such a visionary.
And so early on, we just had this amazing group of people who believed in what we were doing, and then we had the product and people really started to see it. And there were some visionary investors like Blake, Tim Barricat's family office, Darren Ravel's team. Yeah. They've been such great supporters. And then really elite athletes also recognized it in their own life. Locally, Lance Armstrong here.
That's how we met.
Yeah, J.J. Watt, the NFL superstar. He was like, Bill, I love this beer, and has been such a great supporter over the last 5 years. And so we've been really lucky to have this amazing supporter group of angel investors, and then more institutional investors up to Alliance Consumer Growth, KDP, and now General Atlantic. So some really big, very long-term investors who are aligned with what the future of this category can be. But I think they're all also aligned that this category probably isn't going to be what we want it to be if Athletic isn't the one leading from the front. And
it's good incentive.
And so I'm always very aware of the responsibility of being a shepherd of shareholder capital, and looking out for significant investments for both companies and individuals. And so I'm very aware of that. But there are a number of capital pathways we could go, from private forever to being part of have a partnership with a bigger strategic company or an IPO. And I could get excited and make a strategic rationale for any of those three avenues on any day. But I think what I'm most excited about is building a really big, just positive company. And we're having a lot of fun. Non-alcoholic beer is 1.5% of beer in the U.S. In some channels, it's more than 15% of beer. So there's a really clear indication and green shoot that this category made 10x very quickly.
Oh, absolutely.
And in my head, I think it's going to 20x and probably be a majority of adult beverages at some point. And so it kind of the original, why not now moment with my wife of let's do this right now. I also don't want to get off that before my work is done. If this is my life's work, I think it would be to kind of put into a really small example of this. A lesson I learned when I was in college. I went to a great school, perfect for me, Middlebury College in Vermont. It was D3 football, and it was probably the perfect level of sports for me. And I had such a blast there playing 2 years. My third year, my junior year, was riddled with injuries. And
What position did you play?
I played defensive tackle and defensive end.
Okay.
So I was definitely bigger. And one of my biggest regrets was letting those injuries dictate that I wasn't going to play senior year. And then I watched from the sidelines as all my friends were playing football, and like I kind of had nothing going on, and it was a huge regret of me to like not follow through with something. And I've always looked back on that moment, and like I think it would be one of my biggest regrets if I got off the bus when non-alcoholic beer was like 2% of beer, and then the rest of my life it went to like 50%.
We need you at the helm. You're like leading the way.
Like, oh yeah, no. I was the only one saying that was going to happen, but I bailed. Like so,
don't jump ship. Well, it's in your B Corp, right? So triple bottom line: do good, do well. It's yes, your stakeholders, your investors, you have a responsibility to, but that's so great that early on you incorporated, the why and that footprint.
Yeah, and even long before we officially became a B Corp, we were just doing these things. Like we have every one of our teammates is an equity owner from day one.
That's awesome.
We do this environmental program called Two for the Trails, which is 2% of sales up to $2 million a year go to trail and park cleanups, which we've helped over 500 organizations through that program so far. And so we were doing a lot of the great triple bottom line, great employer things. We pay for 100% of benefits for our teammates. I kind of just realized like 2 or 3 years into business, I was like, John, I think we are doing everything B Corps are supposed to do. I was like, let's take a look at the criteria, and we applied. So it's very much been in our ethos, and something that I've taken an increasing amount of pride in too over the journey is being a great employer. Like we have an awesome group of teammates who we have about almost 300 full-time teammates now, and I love working with them. I love giving them good opportunity. I love seeing them grow. We've built a lot of U.S. manufacturing, and we now have almost 140 teammates who've been with us more than 4 years at Athletic, and we're only 6.5 years into like business.
Those are like dog years, right? Athletic, because you're so young.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed that part of running the company as well. So like the company story, the impact, but also like our team is so important to me too.
That's amazing. And I think about too, like we talk about moderation. We did on that panel too of like white space and opportunity for more experiences, and like just growing up on boats and doing a lot of, skiing or wake surfing and stuff. I was in Arizona this summer with my brother and his family, and they have a time, nobody drinks on the boat. Everybody enjoys their NA, their athletic brewing. And then there's then they might switch when they get, off the boat later, but it still gives opportunity to be active and have that like cold beer on the boat that you want, But I can imagine just from a business perspective, people can drink. Like I've cracked an athletic during a lunch meeting Zoom before, and I had to then remember, like, they may not know this. By the way, this is Athletic Brewing. But I feel like not bad or naughty, but kind of like I'm getting away with something. And it's fun. It's like a fun part of your day that doesn't have to be, I love that. I can just imagine the opportunity of.
Yeah, the placebo effect is very real too. It's like having something in your hand, there's the sensory elements of like the smells and the malt and the hops, and I think that goes back a long time in history probably, and is very evolutionary in a way, but and it signals you're relaxing, and it definitely helps take the temperature down, but there is a reward function there too. It's delicious, it's fun, and
celebratory. It's like a moment of. It's a moment almost, right? I would say when you can cheer, like you can toast or.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest realizations for me when I stopped drinking. It was actually very easy. Like as much as I drank in quantity and like days of the week, and there were just so many occasions, and a lot of those were long occasions. I couldn't believe how easy it was for me to stop drinking. I was like, oh, I actually just love being in these places without that functional ingredient of alcohol. And so I think decoupling that is really important. I think cities like Austin are really on the leading edge of, so one thing I think we definitely have to figure out in society is how to get people back to like third spaces, community, in real life things. And you mentioned boating and like having fun with people in the real world. I think Austin's definitely on the leading front edge of that. Like if you
running clubs. And, yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like I went for a run the last 2 mornings down the lake, and I couldn't believe how many people were running in groups, which is awesome. You don't necessarily see that in a lot of places. And, the bars and restaurants are so thoughtful, so creative, like give you real reasons to go out there and have fun. I think it's something we've got to solve in society is like as the corner bar where like so many people used to meet at corner bars as like community meeting places and stuff. We've got to figure out a way to like get people back together in the real world. And so hopefully our products can have a part of that. Absolutely.
And there's an attitudinal side of that and also just after COVID and people retreating and isolating more, like we need to be out and socializing. And so at Renegade, we're always focused on, creating a healthier relationship with time, money, and health. And real quick, we talked about time and we've talked a bit about health, but has your relationship with money shifted since you've transformed from Wall Street every day with 12 screens to this new lifestyle, but also this new responsibility at Athletic and growth?
Yeah, I'd say not really. Yeah, I'm definitely also not like swimming in money, but it's funny as I went from one of the highest velocity, highest turnover hedge funds where I don't have the exact stats, but I probably made between 500 and 1,000 trades a day, very high turnover, and we could be in an idea from 15 minutes to years, depending on the idea and conviction and everything. It's funny, I've taken that like 12 monitors and all the stimuli. My personal financial life is very slow and steady, as passive as it gets. And I find investing with a 30,000 foot view, and I Google the S&P 500 on Friday afternoon, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And having a much bigger picture has like really helped me from that perspective. And you can spend any amount of time you want investing, analyzing investments. And of course, it's easier for me when I'm kind of grading my financial performance on like 5 and 10 year time horizons and not hourly like my prior career. So it takes the pressure off. But I generally believe like changing lanes as little as possible in big financial decisions and stuff, and keeping things. I've tried. Me and my wife is a great influence on this. She's like kind of like a ruthless minimalist almost, where I would tend to be like a hoarder. But it's been a really good influence on just keeping like a very simple life. And I think there's a lot of happiness in just like the more simple your life is, like it makes it so easy to keep like a freer calendar, like less demanding things on your time. And yeah.
I love that. I think your wife might need to come on the podcast.
Yeah, she's sounds amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. So when you were starting to rate, when you first went out and you were like, I've got this concept, and everybody, and this was not today. I mean, now the awareness of non-alcoholic beer and like the cachets there, but did you face quite a bit of rejection when you start to raise? Because you did end up growing so fast. You're like Series A, B, C. Like you were probably just constantly in that fundraising mode, but were there a lot of no's?
Oh, for sure. There was an unbelievable amount of no's and no traction whatsoever.
Because you didn't have it yet. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came from a world where, I had exposure to a lot of people who are extremely wealthy. And I didn't really connect the dots that like no matter how wealthy people are, they make very small angel investments. And I also didn't want to pressure people I had relationships with about money too. I was like, if people asked me about it, I would share the business plan, but I wouldn't follow up because like a follow up is like, a call for funds, and I only wanted people who are really excited and proactive to invest. And so maybe I was too passive, but I wanted to be like respectful about people's money also. And I did 120 investor meetings. So John and I would homebrew in an empty warehouse, and then I would go out to all these investor meetings and dinners after that.
But you landed 66, right? Yeah. So that's like batting 500. Like, that's pretty good percentage.
Yeah. There was a point, though, where I was like 3 for 30, and if not higher. And the hit ratio
went up,
like approached almost 100% in the second half of it. It was very bleak for like 3 months.
Gotcha. And you had to nail and then I imagine the traction, you've been on offense. Yeah. Right. That's great.
What came out of a lot of that rejection, though, was a lot of people who passed or said no or had a very good reason, like don't invest in pre-money or pre-revenue things, and just don't do angel investments in privates is a totally normal thing too. But the amount of people who came back, it was like, your story was notable enough that I was talking about at a dinner party, and these 2 people actually loved the idea and so most of our angel investors are people I did not know originally. They were like one layer away. So it's like someone I knew is giving a reference about the person. And so I've created this unbelievable group of close friends in that angel group who've really... It's funny, like an incredibly passionate group of ambassadors and supporters emerged from that. And then, as we got going and had traction, there was, I'm really glad I came from a financial background, because one of the things you obviously see the most in startups is people don't forecast cash and burn appropriately, and they run into the wall at 100 miles an hour. And, I was glad to come from that background so I could forecast our needs, get way out in front of it, plan for that pretty well. Essentially almost every round in those early years after we finished closing a round, I would be soft raising the next one, essentially, and like thinking about what's the next manufacturing investment, what's the time frame, when do we need the capital. And so backing up there, we ended up doing about a round a year for 4 years, and then it was about 18 months on the next one, and then but I think we're in a really good spot now. We went in interesting times in the world too. It was like,
well, for sure, not easy.
2018, 2019 were relatively normal, but like in that time frame, interest rates were also starting to go back up, and like there was deficit reduction and everything, and then COVID hit. Almost exactly to the day we made our biggest investment ever. We bought
your brewery.
The brewery on the West Coast, 3,000 miles away, on March 17th, 2020.
Yeah.
And then 2021, there was enormous supply chain crises, and like moving goods around was very difficult. 2022, interest rates went vertical.
You've seen all the variables, haven't you, in that short period of time, the ups and the downs.
Yeah, and in that too, it's really changed my perspective on, wow, being a private company is amazing. Like, we're just here doing our thing, like, and it navigating that in the public world is extremely challenging.
Right. Yeah. And back to your decision making and why you're making certain decisions. Is it for Wall Street, or is it for the business, or is it for the growth, or the triple bottom line? And so what's one thing you keep learning over and over in life?
I'm always looking back on myself and like laughing at where I was even 6 months prior. This has been the best interdisciplinary education experience of my life, and that it's also really fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And trying to learn every day and like read as much as I can and learn and talk to people who are farther out on the road in front of me. But I think learning, and then it's so hard to like pinpoint mistakes and say, oh, that was such a big mistake, and really get hung up on it, because everything we've done, we have learned something from, and I'm usually glad we did learn. And it's mostly people things where I like spend the most emotional energy, where I like, because I care so much about our teammates' careers and opportunity and happiness, that like I tend to spend most of my emotional energy on thinking on our team. But like literally anything could break, anything could go wrong. And John and I are like, okay, like how do we figure this out? Like, what can we do? So,
And by the way, so you met John, your co-founder, right? Who's more of the brewing wizard
yeah.
through an ad in a brewing message board or something. Did you?
Yeah, there was a lot of rejection there too. And so I had talked to hundreds of brewers and for very good reasons got a lot of rejection there. Like this was a extremely unexciting space. And John, all the way from Santa Fe, New Mexico, responded and basically he almost immediately got the concept where almost everyone else was like really blocking it out very fast. He saw the potential in it so fast, and we started to just like churn on conversation and email like right from the start. And yeah, and I was basically like, it probably terrified him, but I was basically like within days of him responding to the first email, I was
like full court press.
I was like, can I fly to Santa Fe and like meet you in person?
Awesome.
And but I had a moment where I was giving a tour in our big Connecticut brewery, which is about 100 times the capacity of our original brewery. And we were waiting for John to come out, and the person was like looking at the scale of it, and they were like, wasn't John's brewery in Santa Fe just like a brew pub with no canning line? I was like, yeah, his
so
growth in the business has been like nothing short of impressive. Like I've really admired his learning curve as well. Like I've been on my own learning journey, but like he's been on this totally separate learning journey of like learning about scaled manufacturing. And
I can imagine.
Like I would go to him. So in our early years, like he, say 2020 or 2021, I'd say. So 2020, towards the end of the year, I was like really updating our forecast for 2021. And I was like, I think by June, we need to be able to make like a 100,000 barrel run rate. And he was like, 100,000 barrel run rate. He's like, we are standing in a 40,000 barrel brewery.
Uh-oh.
And he's like, that's 5 months away. But like the amount, he would like internalize that, meet with our team. And we had a full-time construction person at that time. And before I knew it, by May, like there was a new 200 barrel brew house next to the 100 barrel brew house. And that brewery was cranking out like 180,000 barrel run rate within like 8 months of that conversation. The speed at which he's been able to like scale manufacturing and not only like put the tanks in place, but do it at like as we grow, I think our beer is the highest quality it's ever been now too. So
there's a trend I see in speaking with like successful entrepreneurs, and oftentimes that ignorance is a little bliss, where he had his swim lane zone of genius on the like probably more recipe side, but ops is a whole, like, maybe it's just, okay, this makes sense and we're going to do it our way. Like you did, right? You brew in a completely different process and extract, like it's just a completely soup to nuts different, right? And you've got 4 breweries. But when you reached out to him, did you know you were looking for a co-founder, or were you looking for someone to just help with the actual recipe of brewing?
Yeah.
Or were you open?
I hadn't really honestly spent too much time about it, but I was definitely like hiring more someone to like run our brewing operations, not necessarily a co-founder.
Okay.
And it became apparent very fast that John, like we complemented so well and like could like divide and conquer in the business. We have totally different skills and our personalities complement well too. And so it was really clear in a short amount of time that he was a true co-founder.
That's cool. That's cool. That's something that sometimes people get stuck on, is how to find, like, especially tech companies. Do I need a technical co-founder, or do I just need a really good technical person? And sometimes, I mean, there's not a right or wrong way, but it sounds like the chemistry and the complementary talent is what made it.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we got so lucky to get so right in our business. Very often I talk to founders who, they all came from the same career. It's like 4 co-founders who kind of all have the same skills, and that like almost never works because you really only need one person doing that skill. You need well-rounded, complementary people. So, which can be really tough because then ultimately you see them go through an acrimonious process to get to like who is the one that's kind of running it, and then what do the other ones do. And so I think we were really lucky with that. We've been incredibly lucky with our investors, advisors, and board. Like getting the boardroom right is so important. And then our teammates too. It's you were saying like a common thread among like successful businesses or entrepreneurs. I'd say one of the most consistent themes in my entrepreneurial journey is just like how talented everyone around me is, and like it's not like I'm the expert in almost any of these domains, and so it's like people picking up kernels of things and making them amazing.
That's awesome. Well, and it makes sense because your brand attracts. I think it's so much more attraction versus promotion, and you probably attract incredible talent. The brand does, like the product and so that's awesome. A couple of rapid fire questions for you, if you're game. So, what keeps you up at night?
Honestly, nothing. I sleep very well.
You're
a big
the most
believer.
Zen entrepreneur. Like, we need to write a book on this.
I'm a big believer in like work really hard and have the head hit the pillow very heavy at night.
Okay. Do you
but in terms
scroll in bed? Like, do you leave the phone?
I try
out of the room?
not to. Like,
Okay.
if I've been like totally out of touch with the day's news, I will check and like go through Twitter and be like, is there anything major I'm missing? But for the most part, I just try to read a book for like 20 minutes at night and fall asleep, and or I like have wind down something. Me and my wife love like British TV. It's like so relaxing.
Really? Like, what do you watch?
Well, embarrassing to admit this out loud, but Midsummer Murders is this like amazing countryside British sleepy murder series that's had like 20 seasons. And we usually make it about 15 minutes in.
And then you're...
Yeah. But,
yeah. So sleep is not a problem.
Kind
Sleep
of like
score
a little hack there. But in terms of things that keep me up at night, it's mostly just things that affect our teammates. And so it's rarely anything like I think about my family, of course, a lot. So like if there's anything wrong with like school or my son or anything, like that's the kind of thing that would keep me up at night. Or with our teammates, like trying to work through something. Do I think someone's not living up to their potential, or like is kind of mailing it in? Can I get these people back on track? Is the kind of stuff. Because one thing as a company we have to get right is like if everyone wants to work for an exceptional company with like above average results and above average pay and benefits and everything, but like showing up doing the job average does not result in that. So like I have to constantly get the best out of our team too, and so that stresses me out a little bit too. Okay, that's really fair. All-time favorite book? I like The Obstacle is the Way by
too.
Ryan Holiday.
He's been on the podcast too. Oh, he's local. Oh my gosh, that's good.
I've been meaning to visit his bookstore for years, and for some reason it never strikes me when I actually come to Austin to go there, but I've got to. Yes,
you have to. I want to as well. It's on I have a little like to-do list of fun things around Austin, and maybe next time you're back, we'll go. Take him some Athletic.
Yeah, I've never read any of the like primary source Stoic stuff. He's always been like my shortcut to it.
Same.
But I think his life lessons are so great. And then just broadly, I love biographies. So I read a ton of biographies.
Okay. Ego is the Enemy was a good, his first one I think that I read. Pirates or ninjas, who's tougher, Bill, and why?
Oh, wow. I mean, ninjas for sure. I think pirates are just too disorganized. Probably.
But ninjas have it all together.
Yeah.
They're dialed. Going 60 miles an hour consistently. And when you think about being a dad and you're an entrepreneur, you've got a lot going on, a full plate, what's one piece of advice you might give to another parent in this seat?
Yeah. I think lead by example is like what I'm really trying to do. I'm definitely better at conveying verbally what I want like to share with my son, but I know that just bounces off his head, and I've got to do a better job at just leading by example. And so I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from parenting so far.
Awesome. And when I say the word renegade, who comes to mind?
I mean, so many people, but so many people for so many different reasons. We have talked about Blake Mycoskie a couple times, but I think he really did kind of reinvent what like a next generation company could be, and not like every business has to be profitable to be default alive, but like we don't need to like extract every profit dollar from society. There is really strong goodwill benefits of business. If you're a good member of the community, you do give back. And so he literally wrote the book on social entrepreneurship.
Totally.
And so I think that was really influential and has massive ripples in this world in a positive way. It takes care of all different classes of stakeholders. So I think that could be a good example.
It was so radical at the time too, right? And now the buy one, give one. And look at that. And if you were to go back, let's say pre-dinner with your wife, where she's like, I've reviewed the business plan and I'd like for you to give your notice. If you could go back to just a couple days prior to that and give yourself any advice or just a nod of wisdom, what would you say?
It's so funny. It would be really, I've never actually reflected on those days, but I was like totally ignorant of the life change that was about to happen. And I'd still say along the ride, I've been slightly delusional and blissfully ignorant about how challenging the road ahead could still be. But yeah, that's a wild time to reflect on for sure.
That's amazing. A couple days prior where you were, and then that moment.
Yeah.
That greenlit.
And I really wouldn't change much of anything about the journey. And I'm very thankful for the lessons I've learned, the people who've come into my life. And so I think I've gotten very lucky without even knowing it. And now on reflection, I can like really appreciate it. So a lot of my lessons I've definitely learned in hindsight.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and cheers.
Thank you.
Feels like you've only just
fun.
begun.
Yeah, it's great to see you again.
It's good to see you too. We'll have to have you back.
Thank you for having me.